some problems in New Orleans, namely the flooding of Broadmoor, the agreement that the Drainage Department of Sewage and Water Board went into with the Jefferson Parish Drainage. And finally, at the end, we'll talk on some of the programs, construction programs that are presently underway and that are planned for the Broadmoor area. Let's be sure that we all know what we're talking about when I say the Broadmoor area. That's basically Napoleon and South Claiborne, and it involves drainage basin of 6, which station 6 is right here. Okay, now we're talking about drainage to station 6. Now notice I'm calling station 6 a pumping station, and I'm calling station 1 a lift station. All of the water, and this is important to remember throughout the whole discussion, Larry, every drop of water that goes to 1 has to be pumped by 6 to get it into the lake, to get it out of this area. So anything that we do here has to be done at station 6. There is no such thing as improving 1 without improving 6. In fact, if you would take this depression, this low area, and fill it and make it a hill instead of a depression, you wouldn't even need 1. All the water would just flow. All 1 does is lifts the water to a high elevation so it can flow by gravity to station 6. In fact, this little lanyard, when New Orleans was first founded and they were thinking about developing, they knew they were in a swamp, a low area. They actually thought about deliberately walling around the French Quarter and flooding the city each year, just like the spillway. Deliberately flooding and trying to fill it, and then they calculated how many years it would take. They thought they wouldn't do it. So we're left with this depression, and we have to get the water out. Now, the first time that I heard about this problem was probably in the late 70s, around 1980. We had begun to get increased flooding complaints in the Broadmoor area that we hadn't had before. And people were complaining, and I didn't pay too much attention to it until one day I was called into a meeting with Fritz Stahlberg, who I went to school with, civil engineering. He graduated with me, and then he went back to Tulane and he became a lawyer. He was now a lawyer, and he lived on Audubon Boulevard, right on the riverside of Claiborne, and he lived there all his life. He was born there, and he's now living in his father's house, which he inherited. And he was telling, hey, this is happening. Something changed in the operation of the Sewage and Water Board that caused this area to flood. They've had floods before on major rains, but not like they were getting. They were getting 1 or 2 a year. Street flooding mainly, but they were alarmed about it, and they came to talk to the water board to see if there's any change that was done in the operation of the system. Well, after that meeting, I began to take these people's complaints seriously, because I knew Fritz. He was not lying that something had happened. I began to check around and see, well, maybe, 1 has the ability to pump to 2. The gates, they have 2 500 CFS pumps, total of 1,000 CFS, that has gates on them that you can close the gates directed to the Metairie-Palmetto Canal and open them in the Broad and send it to 2. When you do that, now 1 is a pumping station of 1,000 CFS. Notice when I say pumping station, as far as this area is concerned, this water leaving here is being pumped out. This could be Lake Pontchartrain as far as this basin is concerned. And I said, well, maybe that's it. Because I heard that we no longer open the gates on Broad Street. This was a shock to me. I didn't even know that because I didn't know anything about the operation of the drainage system. I checked into that and I found out, yeah, that was true. The gates no longer do they operate and pump any water to 2. The reason they originally planned this station to pump 1 to 2 was when the station was originally built. New Orleans didn't have a sewage system, and the first runoff of the water was highly polluted. So the initial runoff was to go to 2, 2 would go to 3, 3 would go to 4, 4 would go to 5, and then would go out by Bienvenue to Lake Bourne. Well, over the years, in the 60s, and this was Dan Modianis and Don Crowder, had analyzed the runoff of the water and had determined that the initial water was as polluted as the water in the middle of a rain. Didn't matter. And we was, instead of sending polluted water out by Bienvenue, which went to Lake Bourne, which was affecting the oyster in Lake Bourne, they decided, since it was the same water was just as polluted, to just send it to the lake. So starting around 1967 or 68, Station 1 no longer pumped to 2. All water went to 6. So, well, that wasn't the answer while we were flooding, because they're complaining now in 1980. We closed the gates in 1967. So it had to be something else. So I said, well, I need to analyze some rain events. How do you do this? Do I sit around and wait for floods and wait for rains? And then, oh, it dawned on me, wait a minute. The Water Board has the best records on rain of anything, any city in America, in the world probably. We have them in the logs of the station. So I looked up, and I got 17 rain events, major storms, between 1937 and 1983. This was 83 when I was doing it. So I called operations. I knew a fellow there, Charlie. I said, could you get me the logs of Station 1 and Station 6 if I give you the dates? And he said, sure.
Was that Hartman?
That's it, Charlie Hartman. Sure. So I sent him the dates of these 17 rain events from 1937, and he sent it to me. Here are the logs. This is just an example of a log. These are all, look at all the logs that I have here of these rain events. And I began to study them. And this is station 1978. To May 3rd, 1978. Everybody, big rain.
Biggest rain since 1927. Probably.
Right. It was a big rain. So I began to look though, and I plotted. I took a sheet of paper and I plotted the suction elevation at 1. That's on the canals coming into 1, the elevation. And then the discharge, which goes into the Metairie relief, or it could go out broad, but it no longer did that. Remember, since 67, so everything was going out Metairie Relief Canal, or the Washington Palmetto Canal. And I plotted the suction and the discharge. Now notice, here are the discharge elevations, as you see. Look, 22.6, 23, 22.4, 22, now it starts on down, 23, 23. These logs are like reading a rain. You can read a rain. You can actually start reading here on all this, and you can see the rain. Here they're talking about rain, and here they use the word a hot rain. They tell you hot. So you're reading the discharge, and I plotted this. Now, the funny thing about it, from 37 to even after 78 rain, the elevation discharge never exceeded 23. And then suddenly around 79, 80, and right now remember, that's a 78 rain was a big rain. Now, suddenly, this is April the 7th, 1983. Here we got elevations 25 plus. It was off the gauge wouldn't go any higher. This was 2 feet higher than the biggest rain that we ever had since 1927. Oh, and this was every rain after 78. This was everything from 80 to 83. Not the biggest rains, but any kind of flooding rain. I would get these tremendous discharge elevations. In fact, one of them reported that the water was coming through the wall of Station 1 into the station. They had never had this happen before. It was just before going over the cap of the discharge canal. Didn't happen in 78, but now it's happening in 83. So I said, something is happening further down the road, and it's not the bridges. The bridges were there in 37. They were there in 40. They were there in 78. So it's not bridges. Something else is going on, and that's when my thoughts began to go further and study. Now, I remember back in the 60s, I'd say the late 60s, Jefferson Parish group of officials of the Drainage Department came in. I wasn't in the meeting, but I heard about the meeting, and convinced Mr. Sullivan that there was, at one time in the past history of this area of New Orleans, there was a bayou that flowed in an east-west direction, which I never thought any bayou ever did, and I know it didn't. And it was called Hoyes, they said H-O-E-Y. I have a map showing it as Hoy, H-O-Y, possibly as. They claimed this was a bayou, and that we had no right, the levee board had no right to dam that natural connection up, and that they estimated approximately 1,000 CFS went through this bayou into the Washington Palmetto Canal going to 6. And consequently, they said they are due to have that 1,000 put back for us to build a cut in the levee that would give a flow of 1,000 CFS. And Jefferson Parish would build, maintain, and operate a 1,000 CFS pump at Station 6 to take care of this flow. Jim Parker designed this weir connection, and I've always said I would love to see it, because it's impossible to design a weir that would deliver 1,000 CFS only and 1,000 only, and not above. Because the higher the elevation on Jefferson, the more water you'd get through here. You cannot. The only way you could have done that is for them to put a pump at the levee and to pump 1,000 CFS. So that kind of bothered me. That well, they did that, but it's only 1,000 CFS. But that's what started Hoy's Cut. And you know where Hoy's Cut came about? Actually, it was Bienville when he picked the site. I don't have time to go into it now, but he really didn't want to pick the site. He wanted to go further upriver, but he couldn't get around the crescent, so he just dogged off and founded a city in the swamp. But ever since the city was founded, they was forever trying to get a connection from the river to the lake, because nobody wanted to come up the river. Why? You couldn't find the river. If you found it, it was real shallow. It was only about 6 or 7 foot deep. Then if you were able to get in the river, you had about possibly as much as 3 to 4 week voyage upriver, depending on you. Talking about Hoy's Canal and the history of how it came about, New Orleans was here. They were forever trying to get a connection from the river to the lake. Like I pointed out, it was difficult to come up the river in a sailing vessel. They always wanted. The Spanish dug the old Basin Canal from Bayou St. John to Basin Street. They were trying to get to the river. They couldn't dig that deep. Couldn't get to the river. The Americans came along in 1805, and when they designated this Basin Street and Canal Street, they were real wide because they planned a canal to take the old Basin Canal into the river.
Okay.
I actually had a guy come to my office with a letter from Thomas Jefferson committing the federal government to build locks at the foot of Canal Street. That's why Canal Street was named Canal Street and Basin was named Basin Street. And they actually started digging the canal, but the citizens of New Orleans by that time had decided they liked the big wide canal, and they stopped them at gunpoint. So we didn't get that canal. Well, after the Civil War, a couple of guys tried it again, and they formed a company called the Mississippi River and Gulf Canal Company. That's this company that you see right here. They were going to dig a connection from the river to the lake in Jefferson Parish, just off the parish line. Okay. And that's where the connection should have been, because this is much closer to the lake than where we now have it. It wouldn't have disturbed any of the utilities. The board has spent a fortune crossing that.
Can you point out a couple of major landmarks on the map so we know what direction?
Here's the
north?
upper protection levee.
Okay.
This is Jefferson, this is Orleans, here's the river. The purification plant, the water purification plant's right here. And here's where we talking about the canal was gonna be dug. By the time this map was made, a little subdivision came here, but this is an extension of it. We go right here to the lake. And it was gonna be dredged. And by dredging, you need water. So they dug this canal called Hoy's Canal over to our canal, the Washington Palmetto Canal, because at that time we didn't have Station 6. This was tide water, lake level. They could get water from here while they were dredging here to discharge it into the river. So they needed the Hoy's Canal, and that was dug. That was in 1871. Right after the company started operations, though, the courts ruled that they didn't have any legal right to tax the citizens of New Orleans, and they went broke. They had busted, dredge machines rusted right where they were, and that was the end of that, 1871, until we came along in 1915. The Orleans Levee Board was in place since 1893, and their job was to protect the city from tidal water, flood waters caused by the lake or the river, not rainwater. So they had improved the river levee. Now they were improving the upper protection levee, this right here, the upper protection levee, this little hatched area. And they got to the spot where Hoy's Canal was, and they were just going to cover that up. There wasn't nothing to that. There was a ditch. Well, they all got to thinking. So wait a minute. We ought to protect the city from floods. And if they cover this up and the levee breaks between here and Baton Rouge, and that was the reason for this upper protection levee, was the fear of the levee breaking between here and Baton Rouge and all of this area going underwater, because there wasn't any development out here at that time. Mm-hmm. Theod's contention was that if that happened, the water would be trapped between the levee, Mississippi River levee, and Metairie Road in the upper protection levee. It would be a lake. And that if it failed all of a sudden, we, the Sewerage and Water Board, Station 6, couldn't handle that kind of a massive flood, that the city would be flooded. So he said, hey, instead of just covering that up, why don't we build a little 2x2, 2 foot by 2 foot concrete box, seal it off with needle piling, shut it off. But if that happened, you could open it up, and Station 6 could handle a little flow through a 2x2, about 30 cubic feet a second. Take a couple of weeks, but that lake could be drained. Otherwise, there was no way for all this water to get out of this little pocket, hooked in by Metairie Road and Mississippi River levee of protection. He convinced the levee board that this was a great idea, but he told Mr. Earl, George Earl, hey, it can't be the Sewerage and Water Board's idea. This is not our category. This is not where we belong. This is flood water. It has to be the levee board's idea. He convinced them of it, and they built it. It went into effect in 1915. The next time I read about Hoy's Cut was in the flood of 1927. They were worried about the river levee breaking with that great flood, so they went out there and sealed it up, just like I told you, with the sheet pile in case it did. And they actually sent some of the Sewerage and Water Board men to the site. But he told them, said, whatever you do, you don't give orders at all. You're out there just to assist. Levee Board is control of Hoy's Cut. We have no jurisdiction over that. Well, now, in 1968, 69, whenever, here comes the Jefferson Parish group, and they convinced Mr. Solomon that Hoy's Canal had been a bayou. Never was a bayou. There's no bayou ever flows east to west. Bayous flow to the lake. But they did their job. The Flim Flam man would have been proud. We would take it. But again, It was only 1,000 CFS, and they provided 1,000 CFS pump at 6. But it was like the camel getting his nose under the tent, because that opened the door for later on in the early 80s that the Jefferson Parish, some kind of way, persuaded the Sewerage and Water Board to enter into an agreement whereby approximately 2,500 acres of Jefferson Parish lands would drain to 6. 2,500, which was about a fourth of the whole drainage basin of 6. So therefore, Jefferson said, we'll pay 25% of the drainage cost of the station, and we'll put in 25% of the capacity of 6. The fallacy of that whole agreement was they were going on a design storm. The whole agreement said, you know, just like 6, you know, could handle any storm. That's not the drainage system of New Orleans. It never was designed to handle major storm events. We were designed to flood. Let me just read a little bit. This is a speech that George Earl gave to the Progressive Union in 1901. He was trying to tell them that we're fixing to build a drainage system that would take care of a storm event that would happen about every 3 or 4 years. Now, an event that would be bigger than that is expected to be every 10 years, 15, even 100 years, the famous 100-year storm. We couldn't handle that. It didn't make any sense to do that. Here's what he said. If you have effective drainage 364 days in a year, covering over 100 storms, but have to stay indoors or wait a few hours downtown to avoid getting in the water above your ankles on the 365th day, are your interests really seriously injured? Could you afford to subscribe, or rather worse, to give your personal note at 4% interest for 38 years for an amount equal to, say, $20 per capita for each member of your family to avoid this little inconvenience? In other words, the city of New Orleans could not possibly design, nor build, nor operate a drainage system that would handle a 50-year or 100-year storm. It didn't make any sense. You'd have big canals out there that would never be full of water. So we didn't. We designed a but when they went into that agreement and allowed this 2,500 acres, they never thought, well, what happens when you get storms above the design? What happens then? Well, what happens is you enter into your serious floods. Well, when I couple up with that, I probably wrote the best memo that I've ever written. I didn't realize it at the time. Although I've not been directly involved with discussion in Jefferson Parish regarding Law Number 6, it's my understanding that agreement between the two parishes is close to execution. This is October 24, 1985. This agreement would set Sewerage and Water Board's capital cost for improvements to Station 6 and future operating maintenance at 75%, Jefferson Parish at 25%. Percentages were based on total peak flows, which I should have added design from design storms. As reported to you a few months ago, I'm concerned with the effects of the Claiborne Canal between Lower Line and Nashville have on this drainage system. Now, let me tell you about the Lower Line. See, when the people started telling me all about the flooding, everybody was looking at this big old neutral ground area of Claiborne. Why wasn't there a canal in Claiborne from Nashville to Lower Line? That had to be an idea. I mean, that's the way it should go. So I'm looking at our map. Let's see the map over there. And I happen to see that here's where we're talking about. From here, Nashville to Lower Line. Hey, there was a canal at one time. It went a portion of the way to State Street, and then it shows a drainage. That dash means a drain line. But this solid is a canal. So I looked this up. This is a 10-foot canal. So I began to research, and it was about that time that you brought me all the personal diaries of Alfred Vail. And they opened my eyes up. And just to give you a little view of what Larry brought me, this is one of the diaries here. Standard diary. This happens to be 1927, but Larry brought me the diary from 1915 to 1934, if I'm correct. So I started reading, and I found out that there was a canal. That the Nashville Canal, under the original plan of the city, here's the original proposed drainage plan, the famous L.W. Brown. Here's Station 1, here's 2, and here we're talking, here's the Napoleon, here's the Nashville Canal, and here we're talking about this canal right across here. Now notice this is the main canal out this way. This was a canal, but fortunately I had in my records from George Early the original specification for the drainage. This was not a canal, this was a 2-foot ditch, this portion. This was just a ditch that would connect from here to there. The main canal was Nashville on out this way. Well, what happened, as always, the city went in operation. They didn't have a lot of money. They built the Nashville Canal. They covered the Nashville Canal. It was first built as a open line canal, but later covered. It was one of our first covered canals, way before Napoleon. But Nashville was the first covered canal. And they kept, this was future, this plan connection, but they just kept. Notice what happens here. This is 1917. Here we have the canal, and this is just a future canal. There's nothing in here. 1917, and look what happened. 1919, this is the canal. There is no future even plan. They gave up on it. This was easier to let the water go on out to 6 without going to 1. Because Claiborne was a wide open canal. It was great. Well, what happened over the years, and notice here we are in 1928, it's still that way, but by 28, Bayard wrote in his diary, and that diary that in 1920, right after the, in fact it's in that 1927 storm, he wrote to the effect that he has made a study. After the 27 flood, he re-looked at all of his notes, and he wrote that I have decided it was wrong to bring Nashville out Claiborne, that we are flooding the entire area of Claiborne, Leanas, Lower Line, that the canal on Claiborne has to be entirely divorced, and the Nashville Canal has to go to Station 1 as originally planned. So then we changed back to what we have today. And he went out there and he bricked up. In 1918, at Broadway in Claiborne, the Sewerage Water Board and the city went in together and built a 20-foot covered concrete canal at Broadway. It was an open canal down Claiborne, but instead of building a bridge, they both agreed to go 50-50 and build a 20-foot canal. Well, I found that out in your diaries you gave me. So when we started building this stupid canal, extending this 10-foot canal to Lower Line, when they got to Broadway, I sent Lou Brim, said, I want you to be there when you get there and see. And sure enough, the 20-foot canal was there. He took an invert elevation and it lined up perfectly with Nashville to indicate that the flow was that way. Now, what went wrong? I said, hey, these guys back in the old days wasn't dumb. They sealed that up for a reason. Okay, we took bids to construct a 10-foot concrete covered canal to connect this little portion that was existing, still left, to Lower Line. And when they got to Broadway, that's when I found out about the 20-foot canal. And lo and behold, now this was illegal, Mr. Sullivan increased it was Bow Brothers that had the contract, increased it instead of a 10-foot canal, they would build two 10-foot canals from Nashville. In other words, a 20-foot canal, they were two parallel 10-foot canals. Unbelievable. It was a 53% increase in the contract, and it never did go before the board or anything. That's how much, because it was unit price on per foot on a 10-foot canal, but he did it. Even one day, just a little side story, because it would seem like it was almost like everybody was against this stupid canal. When I say everybody, not me, I mean, it shouldn't have been built. Both brothers, they had a 10-foot canal. They were building the new 10-foot next to it. The excavate by the side of it, and piling the mud up over on the canal, thinking that they knew the canal was on piling. It was on piling, but the piling was not anchored to the concrete canal. And all of a sudden, one day, the whole thing shifted over. It cracked in 100 places. I mean, it shifted about 4 or 5 feet. Now, I said, oh man, thank God, we're saved. Sullivan has to shut the job down now and not build that other canal. No, he allowed Bo to jack this broken canal back, slide it back over the piles, and go on about their way, and never charged them anything, never said a word about it. We got a crumbled up cracked canal with a new canal, but we got a 20-foot canal now from Nashville to Lower Line.
When was this done?
This was done in about 85, somewhere in that area. But to go on with my memo, we were talking about that, and I was worried about it, and I said, I made up this little map here, this little sketch. And I showed beyond a shadow of a doubt, I plotted ground elevations in Jefferson Parish, because we had this new agreement. This represents the new acreage over there. Plotted the ground elevations in Jefferson. They're up around 19 and 20. Ground elevations in Broadmoor down to 17, 16.5, 17. Basically average 3 foot lower than Jefferson. The flood slope, now we have two slopes in a canal. You got the invert, that's the bottom of the canal, and you have the flood slope. Flood slope generally they're parallel, but not always. But flood slope is the slope of the canal when the water is flowing at flood conditions. I showed on the map that the flood slope at Lower Line is 18.6 in the Lower Line Canal, heading towards Station 6. The flood slope in Nashville is 16.5. 18.6, 16.5, 2 foot lower. Which way does the water flow? Water flows downhill. So that right away you could see. I mean, a little kid, 5 years old, could see, hey, wait a minute. This means the water from Lower Line is going to flow to Nashville. Not towards 6, but towards Station 1. Totally what you don't want in a storm, and that's what's taking place today. They built it. I sent this memo out, asked for somebody to comment on it. At that time, and I was told by Mr. Sullivan I couldn't write a memo for anybody except to Greco. I couldn't even write a letter to anybody. Nobody. The only thing I could write was a memo to Greco. So I sent to Vincent Greco with copies to Jeffrey, Parkin, Sullivan. Asked for their comments, nothing. I never got a comment back on this. We proceeded with the canal. We proceeded with the agreement with Jefferson Parish. And there we are today. Well, right about that time, one little story. I did raise enough objections to this. And I said, hey, for God's sakes, let's don't do this canal, complete the canal and open it up until at least Station 1 has been improved. Now remember, this is 1985. They at that time, Drainage Station 1 was proposed to be increased to 6,000 CFS. It's still 15 years later, it's still not 6,000. They're still building those 2,000-foot pumps. They're not in yet. I don't know when they're going to be in, but this is 1985. I said, at least let's seal the canal off. It won't take much for a little change order from Bow Brothers to put in a little keyway in the connection at Nashville. Put a little keyway into the sides of the canals, that's just a little U-shape, so that you could slip some steel sheets, inch and a half, I forgot what I calculated. But there were 3 of them, I designed them. They were just solid steel to blank off the canal. And keep it blanked off until one is improved. At that time, one was supposed to have those 2 pumps supposed to be in a few years. Remember, they built the whole system in about 8 years, and they still, 15 years later, they're still trying to put in 2,000-foot pumps. And I got that approved. You know, I raised enough problems, put it in. Canal was finished, and the first big rain we had was the famous Mother's Day rain in 1985, 86, I forget, but it was Mother's Day that it happened on Sunday on Mother's Day. What's that, in May?
Yeah.
And I'm thinking, boy, because I was here, and I'm wondering how did it go? And I get the Picayune paper, and the front page of the paper was a big picture of Nashville and Claiborne, totally flooded. Man, my heart sunk. I said, oh my God, my plan didn't work, obviously. I mean, I sealed the canal off, but it's still flooded. So maybe that canal, maybe I was wrong with the flood, so maybe the water ain't coming. The whole thing. And it was at least a month or 2 later, I was talking to Jerry about that, how bad I felt that I was totally wrong. He said, oh, you didn't know? I said, no what? He said, Mr. Salter took those plates out 2 months before the rain. 3 weeks after you put them in, he had them pulled out and they stored at Central Yard. They're not in there. I said, and nobody even asked me about it. The guy that wanted them in, nobody even said, hey, what do you think of taking them out? He took them out. So, the area flooded. I was right. Now, whether I was right or not, I don't know, but these flood slopes say I'm right, and I think the flooding condition was right, but why would he take them out and never even bothered to ask me? Because I convinced him they were needed, but he took them out 3 weeks after we put them in. Paid Bow Brothers $20,000 and put them in, he took them right out. But we also paid Bow Brothers $2,500,000 to build a silly canal. Well, anyway, that condition is there today, and it goes on. Well, recently, I was looking, first we get now to the famous, majestic, and Masters report on removing of the bridges. The famous bridges that's obstructing the flow in the Washington Canal. About 2 months ago, Larry, I read in the paper, I'm pretty sure I read this, that the Metairie Bridge had been completed and traffic was being opened, and the grade restriction by the Metairie Bridge is now, it had a 50% reduction in the restriction in the flow of the water, and it's now open. I think it cost $5.8 million.
That number's about right, but it's not quite finished. They're still working on it.
Well, but I mean, it was basically opened up, and the flow now can flow through. I want to ask you something. Do you think this new bridge, now we get us another flooding rain, Station 6, do you think it will increase the capacity of 6? That this new bridge will increase the pumping capacity of Station 6 in any way?
The only way it can do any good is if 6 wasn't getting all the water it can pump, and now with a wider canal it'll get more
It'll
water.
get more water. You go back and look at all the logs from 1937, whenever we got a flood and rain, all the pumps at Station 6 were on. Everything in the house was running.
If you're running all your pumps and you're not losing the prime, you're getting all the water
Right.
you can handle.
You're not losing the prime, you can check the elevations, it's not losing the prime. So, it didn't affect 6. It can't. I mean, that's a known fact. I mean, I know you're not an engineer, but it's true. You cannot affect the downstream pumping capacity upstream. Could it possibly increase the pump capacity of 1. So maybe this restriction caused the canal, the Washington Palmetto Canal, to maybe be in a high elevation, therefore 1 has to lift higher.
Yeah,
So now if it's a little bit lower, could 1?
If it reduces the head at 1, it could theoretically have some
Theoretically,
benefit.
that's probably, it's not, but supposing it did. Now here we have Station 6 pumping at full capacity, but we've improved the bridge, so we caused Station 1 to pump more water. Whoa, is that good? 6 is, all the pumps are running, but now we're getting more water coming to 6, so where does that more water go? It's gotta go somewhere. If the two ain't working hand in glove, and there's no way anyway that you could possibly, if you think about it, Meadow Road Bridge is miles from Station 1, right? It's the last bridge, closest one to 6. It wasn't even in this report. Meadow Bridge was not in the report. It's like if we were down here and didn't know any better about the flood elevations of the river, and we built a bridge over the river at not low tide, but average flow, average height of the river. And you get the spring floods, and this bridge causes a restriction. You think that's going to cause flooding in Ohio? Of course not. I mean, the bridge, you're going to cause a little pileup of water right at the bridge for about 10 or 15 feet behind, but then from there on, the level is there. Same thing with this hydraulic flow in the canal. These guys came in, Majestic and Masters, came into a meeting, and for some reason I was out of the drainage department, but I was invited to go to this meeting. And I went to it, and these two engineers I knew. They designed the river, the Mississippi River Bridge. Connolly, I think, was one of them. And he sat there and he couldn't understand what it was Mr. Sullivan wanted them to do. Because he made the statement. He wanted them to study the bridges, but he couldn't understand why. You can't affect the flow of 1, Station 6, with anything upstream. Told him that. But Sullivan persisted. He said, no, you don't understand what I'm trying to get at. And those two guys looked at one another, and I saw them looking, and it suddenly went off like a light in their head. Wait a minute, we're talking ourselves out of a big, lucrative engineering fee. This is what consultants will do. They'll give you any answer you want, as long as they can get an engineering fee. They suddenly, oh yeah, I see now what you want. Of course we can make that study. So they came up with this convoluted study, and this is, I won't go through the whole report, but just to give you a little idea, this is the canal. Here's the solid line would be the slope we were shooting for. This dashed line is supposedly what happened from the bridges. This is the bridge at Cherry Street. The water from here would build up to this flow, and it would stay at this flow. And this one, hell, before it ever gets to Eagle Street, the water was flowing over the canal. That's about, if you kept this up, by the time it got to Station 1, it would have been 40 feet in the air. That doesn't happen. But they could do this because...
You said 1, did you mean 6?
This is 6 down here, but if this took place, by the time this canal water would get to 1, it would be 30 feet up in the air. Here's pumping Station 1. This is the flow. This solid line would, if we took all the bridges out, which we're now proceeding to do.
Can we hold
Not
that up?
not one of them ever needed to be taken out. We spent tens of millions on those fool's bridges, and none of it has done any good. But they are able to do it because Sullivan gave them this thing, this existing condition 6,000 CFS, down here, all the way down at the connection at the Meadowville Relief Canal. 6,000. You can't get 6,000 down here. It's impossible. This whole thing, every bridge they took out was a waste of money, and the Meadow Road in particular was a waste of money.
Well, we have very little sewage and water board money in the Meadow Road Bridge.
Again, I wish to say that I'm talking tax money.
Yeah, I'm not debating it.
I'm not even interested in this. So
We opened a job for $1.3 million to reimburse the state for that work. We haven't spent all of the 1.3 million yet, but we've gotten over $900,000 from FEMA
Yeah.
as a federal contribution to the project.
But
We've got-
again-
got another 40,000 to get.
If it's not needed, why do we do it? Why do we, look at what we have done, the businesses around Station 1 and the people, and we've run businesses out of the parish. The inconvenience of traffic, all this time. And you cannot, if they ever do put the pumps in, you can't run them. Let's get to the final thing. I want to show you something. This is what dawned on me the other day. I was thinking, I had gone through and all the up until between 1930 and 1970, this is what we had. Here we have, I'm showing you now just the area of 6 up until 1970. You had 1 which could pump 1,000 CFS to 2, which is leaving the area, so I don't even have to add this. This is the pumping station. You had 6 at 6,200, and you had Station 1 at around 4,000 CFS. And everything was fine. In fact, you had no flooding for even a 5-year storm. A 5-year storm, you had a 3% surplus. That's why we didn't have any floods up until the 70s. We did have them, but we had them with a 10-year rain or 20-year rain. We didn't have them 3 or 4. Now in 1994, here's what we have now. You see, you don't see 1 being able to go to 2. That's out. You got 4640 coming down the Washington Palmetto Canal to Station 6. Station 6 has the extra 3,000 from the Jefferson Parish, so it's up to 9380. And we have 2,700 supposedly from the 2,500 acres of Jefferson Parish coming in. You have the little Orleans station pumping 400 CFS. when the Orleans station was cried for, and the people were screaming for it, Dan Modiana said, "What do I do?" Because the station wasn't needed. And he didn't want to build a station that was not going to be manned. It's going to be an automatic station. If I ever had any problems, he didn't want it not run. Then it would cause flooding. So he designed it, and he showed me the design. The station does nothing. The station runs some pumps, but it does the same if the pumps are off. But he had to do that to make sure that we still had drainage if the station failed. Because the station is not needed. It all depends on Station 6. But anyway, this is the condition we now have with we had this in 1994. 49, right at 5,000 coming out of 1, 27 out of Jefferson. And your capacity for a 2-year rain is right at Station 6 capacity. I mean, that's the point. We got to 2,500 acres, but it's only for a design storm, for a 2 to 3 year rain. Anything exceeding that, we have too much water in this area. Where does it go? Now, when I showed you before, if you remember, the ground elevation in Jefferson is up around much higher than Broadmoor. Water seeks its lowest level.
It was 2 to 3 feet of that.
Broadmoor floods. It's that simple. Now,
Lights gone.
Larry, for 15 years, we have been building the 2 pumps at Station 1 to increase the capacity to 6,000. I have been protesting at the Washington Palmetto Canal, couldn't take it. I protested at the Poe Canal. Then I was thinking, hey, wait a minute, okay. Let's just assume, all right, all the bridges are out, which have been taken out, but I'll go along with it. Now the canal's wide open. The canal can handle 6,000 CFS. Hey, with the Napoleon Canal, we can get 6,000 to Station 1. All of this stuff is grand and glorious. We have now increased the design storm from a 2 or 3 year rain up to a 10-year rain. which is 6,000. That's great. Then I said, whoa, wait a minute. If we have to pump 6,000 and got 6,000 CFS coming to it, that means we have a 10-year rain, and it doesn't occur just over Station 1. It occurs over the entire Station 6 basin. We're getting a 10-year rain in Jefferson, we're getting it in Lower Line, we're getting it all over the basin, not just there. So I said, okay, now remember the Sewerage Water Board uses the rational formula for designing their pumping in the canals, the pumps, everything. The rational formula is very, very simple. It says Q quantity in CFS, cubic feet per second. Q is equal to AIR. A is in the area in acres. I is the intensity, not just inches per hour, but it's from the intensity frequency curve of all the rains from 1893 have been plotted. These are the rains that we can expect to have in this area. You don't expect to get the kind of rains we have in Phoenix, Arizona. They're the rains we can expect in the New Orleans area. And they're plotted up on a curve, on a frequency curve. But anyway. So, and then, and the reason it's called rational formula, R is a rational coefficient of runoff. And it's about 0.63 to 0.65, depending on which one you use. But that means about 65% of the rain falling when a rain starts gets to the pumping station. The rest of it is either soaked in the ground or hung up in your roof, in the gutter, or in potholes in the street. But it's not 100% runoff. The only condition that you have 100% runoff is when you have a flood. If the water falls in my pool, there is no runoff. Every drop of rain goes on that water surface is there. But for when a rain starts in a regular ground with the density we have with the streets, the subdivisions and all, and that's been done over and over and again. It was done by Adam Main in a good report for his master's degree, proved that it was 0.63. Okay, so we got a Q is equal to AR. Very simple. So I said, well, wait a minute now. I got Q. They're telling me it's going to be 6,000. When Station 1 is completed, we can handle 6,000. The Napoleon Canal is going to be finished. We can get 6,000. It can pump 6,000. So all I did is I plugged in 6,000. We got the acreage to 5,600. We got R, 0.63. What is I? Solved for I, 1.7. I went to the curve and I found out that's a 10-year rain. But it doesn't just fall on Station 1. It falls over the whole basin. So I go back. Now there's two ways you could go back and look at the whole basin. You can go back to Q is equal to AIR and plug in A, the area of the whole basin, including Jefferson Parish, is 10,560 acres. The 1.7 from the curve and the 0.63, you come up with 11,310 CFS needed at 6. Or you don't run 6,000 at 1. You can't do it. You've got to have that quantity. Or, really what it should be, Station 1, remember, Station 6 rather, gets water from Jefferson Parish, gets water from the Lower Line Canal, gets water from the Orleans pumping station, and gets water from Station 1. When you plug in all those things, Station 1 at 6,000, Lower Line, go back to the frequency curve for a 10-year rain, produces 2,200 CFS, Orleans 400, and 4650 from Jefferson Parish. And the reason is, back to the rational formula, what it said was the maximum runoff from any given rain will occur when the rain from the furthest point from that station trickles down and reaches that station. However long a time that took, if the same amount of rain is still falling, that's going to be the maximum runoff. If your rain is falling 1 inch an hour, your maximum is going to be when the furthest Okay, but Jefferson Parish is much shorter runoff to 6. It gets its water there faster. So that little 2,500 acres produces 4,650 runoff on a 10-year rain. So you add up all of those, Station 6 has to be 13,250 CFS. 13,000. You can't. Now back in 1927, when they put in 3,000-foot pumps, they put in 4 at 6. They never was even thought to ever put a pump in 1 without putting a pump in 6. They put in 4, they put in an extra pump to make up for lower line. But they never would ever even think. So what I'm saying is, for the 15 years we've been building those 2 pumps, we should have been adding 2 pumps at Station 6. So what's going to happen? If you have this amount of rain, you cannot run the pumps in 1 because you need capacity of 13,000 at Station 6. We don't have it. It's only a little over 9,000, so you got about 4,000 CFS too much. You first off, the water's going to back up in the Washington Parliamentary Canal, not because of the bridges, but because it's just going to back up. It's going to overflow, so you got to shut the pumps off. So a 10-year rain, you're still going to get the flooding in Broadmoor. Unless they want to put something in at 6, this ain't going to stop. It's just like you had in your wash basin in the bathroom. You turn the water on, you fill the basin up, you don't turn off the faucet, but you open the drain, and you find out, hey, I got the water coming in from the faucet is equal to the drain, but the water stays full. The basin stays full, nothing happens. What happens if I open the faucet some more? I haven't changed any on the drain. It's still changing. That's the drain is Station 6. It's still draining the same amount. So if I open the faucet up more, it overflows. Where does the water go? On the floor. You got a mess. So all I'm saying is, never should they have even considered putting in an extra pump at 1 without doing something at 6. And if they ever do finish it, they're never going to be able to run it. And if they do run it, they're going to get a terrific lawsuit from Jefferson Parish, first off, because the agreement, and they already has indicated some flack about it. But I think they got, their engineers are smarter than I am, and they figured out, well, wait a minute, right? We shouldn't. They're not going to be able to run those pumps. But they already said, hey, you shouldn't do that because you're really going to flood Jefferson. Now the first thing we ought to do is go ahead and close that damn Claiborne Canal up. Unfortunately, the first thing you do is go out there and stop construction of that Claiborne Canal, because that's going to just add and be able to get Jefferson water back to 1 faster. Those canals serve no purpose except to bring the water back to 1. Just like Thayard said in 1920 and 28. You can't have that Claiborne Canal. So let's go close it off. Now if we do, and if you complete the pumps, then yeah, maybe 1 can save Broadmoor, but it's going to flood lower line Jefferson Parish, and the first ones to sue is going to be Jefferson Parish. I guarantee you they'd sue. But you can't have it. And I'll tell you, there's not one person out of 1,000, out of 10,000 in New Orleans that even know that New Orleans is draining 2,500 acres out of Jefferson Parish. And the sad part about the 2,500 acres, it has no limit. Station 6 is well defined with its limit of the Mississippi River levee, the old U Basin Canal, which is now the interstate, and the upper protection levee. It's well defined. Jefferson Parish is wide open. That Hoy's Canal goes past the causeway. The best drained area in 6 is at Battery Country Club. But Hoy's Canal goes past the causeway. But what's to prevent it from going further? There's no levee. There's no limit to Jefferson Parish.
The further it goes, the more you're going to get.
The more you're going to get. The more service you're going to give to Jefferson at the expense of Orleans. So if New Orleans people know about it, you can get a class action suit out of the people in New Orleans. So what I'm saying is, we've had a slack period of rain for about the last, 3-4 years? We haven't had it overall. We haven't had any of the major rains. We had from 1980 to 1995, 15 years, there was 13 floods. This is floods that brought in FEMA. People I mean, their homes, their slabs were flooded. I personally knew Oliver Dellery lived near Station 1. Every time we get a rain, I'd call up, you all send me the products, and he'd be home with the federal insurance, checking out how much money he was going to collect. 13 times in 15 years, they collected money. Now FEMA has finally, if it wasn't for FEMA, I don't think we ever would have been in this position. I don't think we ever would have made an agreement with Jefferson Barrett. FEMA allowed people just to sit back and absorb these floods because they had the federal government. I got my survey crews one day to run elevation from Station 1 to Audubon Park. I said, take any street you want, Octavia, you just meander through, and take me a slab elevation every block from one house. And don't pick the house that you think is the lowest, just pick an average. They untold houses that's 1.5 to 2 feet below FEMA requirements right now. In other words, we don't have to have a flood exceeding FEMA. We just have to have a normal flood, and you have those houses all have FEMA insurance because they got subsidized rates. Now, if FEMA wises up, and they all wising up, those houses, it's going to be cut off. Those people are in trouble. You don't raise a slab house, you can't do nothing but sell it. They got serious problems coming up in Broadmoor. And you watch, the weather pattern is going to come back. We're going to get back into the rains. We're going to have the floods. And I don't know what the solution is going to be, but it's going to be bad. Because you can never run those 2 pumps. And the people have been inconvenienced for 15 years, and then they're going to find out they can't run the pumps. And they're going to say, didn't somebody ever think that you had to put pumps in at 6? What was wrong with y'all? That's what they're going to say.
Well, they have increased the capacity of 6 since I've been with the water board from around 6,600 cubic feet a second up to about 9,300.
93. Why? Because of Jefferson Parish.
You're saying 9,300 is not going to be enough?
Nowhere near enough. It's got to be up around 13,000.
Yeah,
well, it's certainly got to be at least 2,000. If you're going to put in 2,000 at Station 1, you automatically got to put 2,000 at 6, a minimum. They're not doing it. 15 years they've been building those pumps, and there ain't been a thing going on at 6. It's still 9,300. Doesn't make sense. And that's my point. When I finally realized that, hey, wait a minute. If it's truly going to be 6,000, then we got a 10-inch rain to take care of.
Yeah. Wes, let me go back and ask you something I didn't quite understand about the rational formula.
Okay.
You said the R in the rational formula was runoff, and that the
runoff coefficient
was about 0.63 to 0.65. Now it seems to me that would vary based on the intensity of the rainfall.
Of course it varies, but that figure is from a rain. That ain't the rain. Now if we get a rain today, and you get another rain 3 days away, that ground's going to still be saturated, so that rational is going to increase.
Yeah.
This is a rational formula based on a rain falling, say, after it's been about 2 or 3 weeks, no rain. We get us a rain. And now once it floods, like I told you, you're 100%. You can throw it in rational form. It can never go down, it can only increase. The 65% is in a condition like right now. If we get a rain, and say it's a 1 inch or 2 inch rain, about 35% will be absorbed in the ground or trapped in roofs and potholes and etc. But it's rational. It varies, and it works though. That rational formula, and the reason it's rational, the CFS, if you used acres or in square feet, the I is in inches per hour. The rational is in nothing, but if you try to justify that, there ain't no way you can get to cubic feet per second. But it all works out with that little R rational formula. It's a rational formula, and it works, but it works only for large areas, 1,000 acres or more. It won't work at all on a 200 or 300 acre. It'll blow you out the window. That formula doesn't work.